Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Hi, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast. This is episode 554 for the 10th of Sivan in a regular year. So on the 27th of September in the year 1905, Albert Einstein published a paper entitled, "Does the Inertia of a Body Depend Upon Its Energy Content?" And in this paper, Albert Einstein basically described the idea of how mass and energy are interchangeable, otherwise known as E equals mc squared. So subsequently, throughout many years that followed, there's been the discovery of quantum mechanics. And through quantum mechanics, we've come to understand just how true this idea of E equals mc squared, the interchangeability of mass and energy, really is. So while in many ways, quantum mechanics actually appeared at first to be at odds with many of Einstein's discoveries and presented a lot of challenges to them, in this aspect, they really did match up. And in fact, quantum mechanics really presented this idea in a much deeper way. So I had a previous episode quite a while back where I talked about the double slit experiment, which if anybody wants to go back and dig up any of my old podcasts about that, you can try to find it, in which I really tried to the best of my ability to describe the way that quantum mechanics really showed the interchangeability of wave and particle, and how light is neither strictly a wave, neither strictly a particle, and it really depends on our perception. So that's a very cool idea. But today we're going to focus on another aspect of quantum mechanics and another aspect of this idea of physics in general in our reality, namely this idea that the reality that we see around us is much less real, much less substantial, quote unquote, than it appears to be at first glance. There's a really good article that I discovered from Business Insider, actually, which I think I'll publish in, which I think I'll link to you in the show notes, perhaps, and you can read about it. It's entitled 99.9999999% of your body is empty space. And it basically just tries to explain this really crazy, mind-blowing idea about how you really break it down to the fundamental makeup of who we are and what our world is, it's really made up for the most part of electrons, which are really just empty space. And how the one aspect of this, for example, that the article brings is that atoms, we know that they have a nuclei, which is like the center of the atom, and these nuclei are 100,000 times smaller than the atoms that they're housed in. So to bring that into some context, as is written in the article, if the nucleus were the size of a peanut, the atom would be about the size of a baseball stadium. And so, like, if we lost all of the space in us, each of us would be able to fit into a particle of dust, and the entire human species would fit into the volume of a sugar cube. So this is pretty crazy. And the article gets into this a little bit more in detail. And it also talks about how one way to understand this, because when push comes to shove, we do feel like we're here. We do feel very much alive and tangible. And the author of the article likens this to the idea of a fan, where like if a fan is blowing really, really fast, even though much of the fan is also empty space and the blades are only like a portion of the fan, nevertheless, we all know that it's really dangerous to put your finger in that fan because you most probably, God forbid, will get hurt by the blade. So we can kind of think of like the blades as being all around the fan, even though they really in reality are only making up a portion of the fan. Because of the fast momentum and the fast movement of the fan, then it's as if those blades are there entirely. So to the point that if we really pictured a fan that was moving fast enough, which is really kind of how we can think of our atoms that are spinning and rotating, then you could have very few blades and very small blades, and it would still have the same effect if the momentum were high enough. So this is the idea of E equals MC squared, of the idea that energy, enough movement really does create something which we think of as matter, some kind of tangibleness. So this is all by way of introduction to lead us into what it is that we're going to be learning today, which is this whole idea on a spiritual level, which takes it even to the next level, and which follows what it is that we've been learning about the nature of our reality. And that the nature of our reality is, again, according to Chassidus, not what it looks like on first glance. And this is where I think that science is sort of starting to match up on some level with what Chassidus teaches us. And we talked about how, according to Chassidus, the fundamental makeup of reality is it takes it beyond even the atomic and the subatomic level, and even further than that into the actual spiritual makeup of it all, which is the letters of speech. The letters of God's speech, which again, interestingly enough, is if you think about what is speech, speech is nothing other than vibration, which in another sense can be thought of as energy or movement. So once again, I feel like there's a parallel there, which maybe those of you who might know a little bit more about physics or about the subject might be able to appreciate even further. So today we're beginning a new chapter 3 of this book, Sha'ar, HaYichud ve'Emunah. And so let's get straight into the text and see how the Alter Rebbe explains this very profound idea about how it is that our worlds, the world that we live in, is really hanging by such a thin thread. And that thin thread really is the speech of God, which is something that we began talking about in the previous few episodes as well. So the Alter Rebbe begins this chapter and he says that after learning about these things that we've been talking about and this truth, every person who really thinks about this will really understand how every single creation and every single yesh, like every single something in the world, is really considered like not enough and nothing, truly, in comparison to the activating force, the koach hapoel in Hebrew, and the spirit of God's mouth, which is being activated in this being. And it's bringing this being always from nothing into something, always. So we talked about this yesterday, how like God it wasn't just a one-time event, ex nihilo, but it's something that's continuously and perpetually happening at all times. And so how is it, the Alter Rebbe asks, that these creations appear to us as being actual things and actual somethingness? They seem very tangible. This is because we don't understand and we don't see with our eyes of flesh, this power of God and the spirit of his mouth in creation. But if we were given permission to see this, if it was given to the permission to the eye to see and to understand the vitality and the spirituality that's found in every single created being that comes from the God's mouth and from the spirit of his mouth, then the physicality and the materiality of this created being would not be seen to us at all. Like it would vanish from our existence because it would be batal b'metzios. It would be nullified in its source, truly, in relation to the vitality and the spirituality that's found within it. Because without this spirituality is what's sustaining it. So without this spirituality, then it would be really not a nothingness, just like it was before the 6 days of creation, truly. So it's not only that it would cease existing right now, it would be as if it never existed ever. And the spirituality that is drawn into it, which comes from what comes out of God's mouth, from the speech of God's mouth and the spirit of his mouth, is the only thing that is constantly bringing it into being from nothingness and not and like emptiness into something substantial, into a true existence. And thus, without the spirit of God's mouth, it truly is nothing without him, truly. So that's the end of the section. So just to summarize and conclude. Again, I don't want to make like such a hard parallel, because I don't want to say that like, this is maybe just something I want to make clear, is I don't want to say that like God's speech are the electrons. That's not what I'm saying, because as much as science can be an interesting way that can be helpful for us to understand these ideas, and I do really believe that it seems as if science is moving in the direction of coming closer to being in line with Torah. Nevertheless, we have to understand that science is limited in its scope, and it's not. And as much as science does tend to point towards a lot of our understanding and help us understand the universe around us, it is man-made and it is thus flawed. So if we really, really want to understand true truth, really the starting point and the origin of that all needs to be Torah. And so in conclusion to all of this, so we started off today talking about this idea of the electrons and talking about this idea of how in quantum mechanics, it's really been demonstrated how interchangeable matter and energy really are, and how the universe around us, even according to our perceivable scientific research-based eyes, we really can see the very flimsy nature of our existence. And then today we learn this from a Torah perspective, from a Chassidus perspective, about how it is that truly what this true flimsiness of reality, what it is that's really at the basis of reality, is nothing other than God's speech, than the spirit of God's mouth. And that this is the true reality all around us. It's not what we think it is. It's not like we're not as the things around us, the physical reality around us, it doesn't have an inherent existence of its own. What's keeping it alive is God's speech, constantly and perpetually at all times. And thus, if God's speech were to vanish, God forbid, from any one of these things in the world, the thing would totally and utterly cease to exist. And it would be as if it never existed ever at any time, because its entire existence and its entire, what's keeping it alive and what's keeping it in reality is God's speech. So this is where we'll leave off today, and tomorrow we'll go into this a little bit further, and we'll try to understand this a little bit deeper through the analogy of looking at the sun and seeing how the sun relates to its rays. So stay tuned for that, and I will speak to you then. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shoshana. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.